welcome to Asake Online. My name is S01EPS20, and this is the Breakfast Club, a program where we talk about many issues that affect us, and we're talking about social issues, about politics, and any other issues that happen in our community. And we would encourage you to give us a ring and get in touch on our social media pages if you have any topics, any ideas of what you think we should talk about, or any issues that you think we can address, be they issues of service delivery. We also want to talk about the history of Zipra. If you know any Zipra comrades that you think it would be good for us to profile them, please get in touch. We want to hear their stories. Today in our program, I have quite a unique program. Let me say, you are not going to see the guest because we are talking about something that many people don't want to accept or not want to hear about. And my guest that I'll call X is not comfortable to be in or to be seen. But I think what we are going to talk about is quite important. It's something that we all need to be aware of, and we might learn one or two things. And I'm talking about the issues of, let me say, the issue of, gays and lesbian, transgender, queer. Those are the issues that many times in Zimbabwe, when you talk about it, people frown, people tell you about culture, people tell you about religion. But yes, of course, in our communities, there are gays, there are lesbians, there are people who are transgender, there are people who transition, probably born, or not probably, but born a woman and then transition to be a man. And I'll be talking to someone who has taken that journey, and I want to find from them how easy it has been, what are the challenges that they're facing, and all those kind of things. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
I hope in the program, but tell me, I won't even ask Ruti was along at Pinjan, but growing up, how did you identify yourself in terms of your identity?
Okay, so basically growing up was it felt like a mystery from the time I was very young, because even the things that I used to identify with, the way that I preferred to play, the way that I felt even about myself, I always felt very lost. There was no sense of belonging. I mean, I could play with other children my age, but somehow I always felt like something was misplaced. So I remember even back when I was young, there used to be wrestling, and there was this wrestler, Hulk Hogan. It was my favorite wrestler. So I remember this one time, actually even after a match, running outside and also tearing the vest that I was wearing in the same way Hulk Hogan used to. And for me, it just seemed like the natural way of being. But then caught between this space where then even the clothes that you are made to wear, the things that are suggested for you, the things that are done for you, the groups you are put into when you get to preschool, it just didn't make sense to me. I think for me, I didn't feel it as much at home, because at home, it's not too much gendering that happens at home. But when you get to school, it's very defined. So this group is put there to do whatever. And I always had clashes with the boy groups every now and then, because for me, I would just naturally move there to play, and they would want to like draw lines to say, no.
As from Mankasa, something like that. Yeah. So I met you many times ago, many years ago, and I always found it with Modlo, you associated mostly with guys, and you were mainly interested in activities of guys rather than. So how did other young girls take that and look at you? And
I think it's funny how when a view is of an individual and when it's of a group, often you'll find that it's different. So when something was now in a defined space like school or maybe church or somewhere else, this is where you would actually get more of people whispering and raising their voices. But when you actually were hanging out with people or doing something with people, they really did not seem to take their minds there. So it wasn't an issue of any kind of shock. And I think back in the I don't know if it is, I think back in the day, there were many of us, and people knew in town, oh, there's that one, there's that one, there's that one. That I remember there was one also, I believe, was a transgender woman who died many years ago. And people would see us, and of course it was not, but there was no hostility then. When we were growing up back then, there was no hostility. Obviously, people would see difference, but for them, it would be a topic, but not a hostile topic.
Yeah.
Until later on, in many years later, I think also after the time that I think some of those speeches that the previous president used to say, people now started having opinions that are a bit cruel, and as if there was some bitterness to the existence of these people who look different. And the more, I think that the strange thing is, the more of visibility in terms of talking, not just physical people, the more people then seem agitated about something. I don't know. And what's said is often they don't even have the full understanding or information as to the group of people that they dislike. They just found, if it's others who found people disliking, they just take it up and follow. If it's others who, whether it's from upbringing and being told, or when the generations and what started showing LGBTI people, then that's when people really started being told being shaped in terms of their opinion about people who are different in that sort of way.
I think me and you have known each other probably for over 20 years. And honestly, I've never identified you I never identified you as a woman. And I remember having, many years later, we were having just a conversation, and you were saying to me, sometimes I feel like I'm trapped in a wrong body. And we'll joke about those things and talking about girls and all those. So did you ever you talked about church. Did you go to church, and how was it like?
I went to church, yes. I was actually, as a younger child, I was quite active. And I think because of the many struggles, there were some that were related just to family life, but also that whole pressure, and I just couldn't really get right with myself. So I remember I approached one of the youth leaders in church at the time to say I'm just struggling, and I think depression, I think back then wasn't spoken about, but I'm sure what I was going through was depression as well, because I just couldn't figure myself out, and I felt so detached from the rest of the world. So after I told that youth leader, unfortunately, the person's response was then to negatively start taking me out of certain church groups. And I think from there, I was like, you know what, if I'm supposed to get a sense of assistance and comfort in this place, and then this is what happens. Ironically, this person was censured a few months later for making someone pregnant in church. But for me, this is where I just decided, no, if I cannot find that kind of solace there, then I would rather not go. So I left quite young from the church space.
So at home, at what point do you have a conversation to say, you know what, I think I'm lesbian, or I think I'm transgender, or what? At what point do you have that conversation with your family?
Okay, so for me, this is my personal opinion, that at least with trans people who are across the spectrum of being transgender, even before, I know with the lesbian and gay space, they always talk about coming out. So they come out, they decide to tell people that they're attracted to the same sex. For transgender people, it's different.
You're already out.
You're already out.
Yeah.
People always, they see peculiar, strange things about you. And I think from as long as I can remember, even when we talk to other groups of people, older people, about that one person they saw who always had this difference, this behavior that was of the other gender, and for as long as they can remember, they'll remember that there was that someone. So there is not necessarily coming out with being transgender. The irony of it is when you come out is now when you've transitioned, when you tell someone and they can't see the difference, that's when you come out. So for me, initially, because back then people knew of lesbians and gays, so the immediate assumption was lesbian. So I rolled with it, But even then, as I was at least the only thing I guess we shared with this group was that there were also people who people didn't understand, and at some point later on didn't like. So we had that in common. But I also never felt a sense of belonging there because it didn't speak to who I felt I was. It didn't speak to what I was struggling with myself. And at that time, there was no language, or I could never even imagine there was someone else who was feeling the way that I was. I saw one or two friends who were similar, but I didn't have words to explain who I was back then.
So you grow up in this community and society that seems not to understand you. And what does that do to your mental being, to your development and trying to achieve goals like in other kids?
Yeah, I mean, even then, I didn't even understand myself, let alone society. So I was a very depressed young person. I think one of the things I always say helped me from being bullied was I was quite a big-bodied young person. So yeah. Plus, then also the way I got involved in talent spaces, that gave me some sort of an edge and a popularity. But I was also, most people would, I remember one person describing that you used to walk around with your backpack.
For many, I mean, even up to now, you work with the backpack. But I still remember from the first time I saw you, and everywhere.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
I understand it now. It's a concept we call layering in the transgender community, especially transgender men. So the discomfort with your body, you tend to layer out. I remember even in summer, I would have a blazer on, or like the backpack as well. That sort of feels like it's drifting the attention from people then looking directly at your body. So I would layer a lot, and my backpack was part of that. But also there were many times I would always be walking by myself. So this guy was talking about the one time, it's like you would walk by yourself and look like you're about to beat somebody up. And yeah, I guess it was a lot of struggle. I spent most time just writing by myself. And even when I'd be with groups of people when they knew me, there was still this thing, like I always used to walk with my head down. And the sense of confidence, I never really had much confidence. It was different when we're doing entertainment activities, because there you feel like the concentration is not on other aspects of who you are. But in social spaces, I struggled a lot because my confidence was always very low.
So where do you find solace? Where do you find peace? At one point you say, okay, this is who I am. How do you find yourself in this crisis of identity?
Yeah, so it's very complex because back then, even the institutions that were there and interacted with, still you are feeling that emptiness because you are there with them, but you don't feel yourself. So for me, I was fortunate enough to, then I remember late, there was one trans woman who I think had also had traveled a bit. So they then got me in touch with other people from other countries who I felt that I really, it seemed like it spoke to me. But the one other person that was, and this was now when we got into the internet age. So this other young trans guy, we still interact and work together. He knew himself because he had just googled one sentence that then brought up the things that he knew about himself. We didn't have that at our time. So now I had this younger person telling me like all the stuff about how I'm feeling. Because I remember initially when I would be called transgender in spaces, I would react angrily. Because back then, as far as I knew, it was something that people called people who are crazy. Like there was a sense of ungakwananga kind.
So how did you want people to describe you? Because that's one thing that many people struggled with, and I guess that's many people struggle with even now.
I think then I just my name, especially in short, for me that was more comfortable. But even the pronouns, the she program, or
when someone they're not sure whether to call you he or she.
Those things used to make me feel uncomfortable, which is funny because now a lot of my schoolmates, now when I speak to them, they're like, no, it makes sense to us that you are transgender, because from the way that we never really saw you in a gender. You were just this peculiar person. So yeah, for me, that information from that young person, it then started helping me to understand a bit more, and then also start looking up information, and then you realize, this is exactly, it speaks to exactly who I am.
So at what point do you decide to say, I'm going to transition and I'm going to do this? And
yeah, that one is a difficult one, because if you're in a country where you don't have the resources to do so. So what actually happens with transitioning, you start with what they call a social transition. So back then, in countries where they had, like across the board, where they had access, what would happen is they would start with, you would live a social transition. You would dress and live as the gender that you feel that you are, and for some time. So they would give you some years that you would live that way. Then after that, and you'd be seeing a psychologist through the process. And then after that, then just to ascertain if really this is who you are. After that, they would then prescribe that you go through a medical transition. So with the medical transition, this is where now it start with hormone therapy, and then some surgeries, very costly surgeries. So in other countries, there are systems that support people's transition, but for ours, we don't. So even up to today, though the system has changed, it's become more accessible in those countries. Still, the issue of it's still a diagnosis. So what we go through is something called gender dysphoria. So this gender dysphoria is what normally, it can drive someone even to points of suicide. There have been stories of trans people who have self-mutilated their bodies because they couldn't connect with their body. So with that diagnosis that I think now in the ICD-11 is gender incongruence, which has been moved from mental health issues into around the same section that has pregnancy and other things. So after that, then after you get your transition process, then you integrate into a normal day-to-day life in society. But also it's not that simple, because what they've also realized is the gender dysphoria. Some people have more issues with certain parts of of their body than others. So like for me, specifically, like I top dysphoria a lot. A bit of bottom dysphoria that was related to obviously things like the cycle that women go through. And so I've had partial bottom surgery in that regard. And then for the top, I'm looking forward to, though people always say we don't think you need it because my chest is quite.
Pero really amazed there. So like, so I say, mas kuma in surgery, I'm saying myself, you know, come we amiyana kwami uzikhayela yeah, you can.
Yeah, I mean, there's like with the chest, like still somehow, like there's certain aspects of, and a lot of people after the surgeries, they feel so free that it's almost like you start a puberty afresh and you then start really living life. So simple activities, being able to get up and work and be involved in stuff, and then go to spaces and gatherings for as long as it's easy when you're. So some people move away from where they lived before, because I mean, the changes are very noticeable.
Yeah, once you can get the
And then they start a new life, and just a normal everyday life, and mostly no one will even know that you transitioned, and you just live your life.
I can assure people that but for people who meet you, no one would ever, most people won't notice that you actually transitioned if they didn't know you. You know, so you are in Zimbabwe here. So that means that you have to every time go outside the country for these services.
Yes, I mean, for the diagnosis, and because we don't have these systems here, you have to do it out of the country. And then also that means even as you are going through hormone therapy, you can't get your regular blood work checked, which means it also poses a risk in terms of because you need your blood work checked often, just to see the right dosage, and also to see that you're progressing healthily, because we know with any medical process there needs to be some sort of assessment and from a doctor. So because we don't have that here, we have a lot of trans people who are even self-medicating, and sometimes with any random thing that causes changes. We'll allow these Nigerian things now. I know a lot of trans women, they take these abuja what things that says corner, just to enhance their bodies, so that you can at least sort of look at yourself in the mirror, because the problem begins with you. It's not about how you look to others, it's yourself being able to be comfortable in the body that you live in every single day. So abantu, they're using a lot of harmful things because there's no proper channel there, and a lot of black market hormones. You never know if they're safe or not, and there's no continuous blood check just to see if you're progressing healthily. But for people, they would rather take that risk than death seems less scary than, not taking the journey that will then put you in a more comfortable position to live in.
So, I mean, now you've transitioned, and let's say you have a passport that says Anna. Now you look like Zenzele. You get to your passport office there. What happens? What are the experiences that you go through?
That's where it's a difficult life, which is why often with the young trans kids, we tell them, we try to make sure they understand that this is not a journey to just take, because impiliwa nzima, So anything that requires you to use your identity document becomes a huge and terrible task. So from even if you lose the document, to go and get the document afresh. I think the most recent experience was the better one of them all, but because I think we have been speaking to a few departments here and there, one or two of us, to make them aware that they're trans people. So you go there, the person looks at you. So recently it was better because as much as you could tell that, and I'm like, is this you, over and over again? And then you bring your supporting documents, and then obviously now my passport, my ID, at least immediately you go into the fingerprints. Those ones will be the same. So it's fine. But now when you are traveling, or when you are going to the bank, we had to go through a process of notifying. But any other general trans person, that means accessing your own money becomes very difficult or impossible.
Because umuntu olemali nomuntu lapha kusahambelana.
So mina imali I can only get at my local branch. Anywhere else, then that whole process. So also the whole thing with the face, like you get to a point you're tired of constantly. It's you live a life of having to explain yourself over and over and over again. Like you get tired. Like,
so each time you're traveling, you have to explain.
Each time traveling,
getting the bank, you have to explain.
Anything that you need to do that's official. I think even we registered to vote. Most trans people, like,
I was just going to ask,
they just
didn't
bother themselves. No, I'll be honest. A lot of us, we just didn't bother ourselves because, that whole procedure, it's a difficult one.
And society, I mean, we with the challenges, but in terms of society, how does society take you? Do you go around and people look at you, or especially those who knew you, or it becomes okay?
Most times, I mean, you're just a general person every day. But the moment sometimes, it's just fortunate that a lot of the people I know, when you leave, if they remain having conversations. But when you are there, I haven't really felt, but also because my confidence is much higher. I've gotten to a point where I'm like, you know what, I couldn't care any less. Even if you all have an issue with me, you all hate me, but I'm just living my life. It's enough for me.
So I would say probably 15 years ago you would not be having this interview, and I guess 3 years from now we'll have you with a face, and so the confidence is coming back.
Yes.
Yeah. But lastly, what would you say to someone who wants to go through the process that you went to?
I mean, it's a very difficult path. I mean, even imagine when you are admitted in hospital, you look a particular way. I had a certain procedure recently, and then the way you look, and everyone is in shock. But I think it's important, and we continue to work towards a point where people will have safe access to properly go through the channels, be prescribed as per their diagnosis, and be able to access transitioning services. But they must I think, try their best to hold on to every bit of themselves. It's taken us a long time to get to where we are, and I know I get a lot of young people approaching me, and they want to transition, and so bad that but there's nothing that you can do to help, and you can't exactly direct them to these other channels because it's not a possibility. But I would just say a young person should hold on, because things are going to get better. Things will get better, but to try every small thing that they can to transition socially and the best, make themselves feel the best. It's like with a young trans man, I always tell them it's important to eat healthy, to work out, you know, ungaqala ukujima. At least it gets your body in a position that's more livable in that body. And then with time, you will eventually get that chance. It's unfortunately that you have to redo puberty as yourself once again, but after that, it's always good to get a chance to live your life, not a life that doesn't feel like yours, but to live your life and smile in the morning like every other person and have ambition and chase your goals.
Yeah, well, I think we'll leave it at that. So I can call you. I mean, your right term is transgender man.
Yes.
Oh yeah, because when we started, I was not quite sure where to start and where to end.
The problem is people they mix up the two. So
Yeah.
sexual orientation, like transgender, has nothing to do with sexual orientation. We are attracted to most times transgender people are not even sexually active because they have so many issues with their own being. And then, but when society sees you, they sexualize you and they
Transgender people are not sexually active.
no, for a lot of them are not sexually active. Like when you're not yet comfortable with yourself.
Okay.
Once someone is comfortable with themselves, then they can start to look into who they are attracted to. And most people will assume because I'm a trans man, automatically it means I'm into women. We have a lot of trans men who are they never changed who they are attracted to according to, just because they transitioned. It doesn't mean that they're automatically attracted to women and so forth and so on. So who you're attracted to, your sexual orientation, being gay or lesbian, has nothing to do with your gender identity. Your gender identity and being trans is a separate issue that's to do with you at the level of individual self.
That's a mouthful, and that's a lesson because people tend to assume, and it is because people don't. Mainly, these are the issues that we normally don't talk about, and when we do talk about, people frown, they will insult rather than understand. But you need to realize that tomorrow it will be your brother, it will be your sister, it will be your kid going through the same, and you need to understand someone where they're coming from. And anyway, who are we to judge, to say so, so? And this is the program that we're talking about, and the guest that I have today, he was explaining the transition and the complications that come with it. And of course, I'm trying all this so that I can be visual. So I'll be tempted to just use their name. So before I do that, let me end the program here. And my name is S01EPS20. You can give us feedback on our platforms, and have a good day.